Space Kitty Cats! I'm indulging myself this week and making another illustration video. If you've been watching along this year, then you'll know I've been doing a series on folklore and fairy tales, and I was reminded when feeding the ducks with my son of the story of the ugly duckling. Grab your supplies and draw along with me. I've started off with a rough sketch which I've transferred very lightly onto my watercolour paper. My fave paper is Daler Rowney Aquafine, hot pressed smooth, £140 in weight. Normally I'd use my black ink pen for my outlines, but today I'm going to use a soft pencil, and this one is a 6B. Please excuse my gravelly voice. I've been sick all week, but I really wanted to bring you this story and illustration. The original story by Hans Christian Andersen is much more disturbing than I remember it being as a child. The one we normally hear has been somewhat sanitised for little ears, but I'll be giving you my version of the real story. As Mother Duck sat on her clutch of eggs late one spring, she felt a little wobble and then a crack as the first of her babies emerged from their eggshell. It was true, one of her eggs was much bigger than the others, but she didn't really give it that much thought. One by one, the ducklings hatched, until one egg was left, the biggest. But finally, a crack sprouted across the shell and out came a baby. It was very different from the others, grey instead of yellow, with long legs and a black beak. Its siblings teased it mercilessly, calling him ugly and weird. Mother Duckling told them off and tried to comfort the big grey duckling, who indeed did look mightily different from her other babies. Poor grey ducky. It made him feel sad and outcast, so he wandered off into the marshy field outside the farm where he was born. There, wild geese and ducks lived, and they were much nicer to him. He felt that perhaps these were his people, until hunters came and shot at the birds. He dived under the nearest wheelbarrow and hid. When it was safe to come out, an old lady took pity on the small, fluffy little flumpet and took him home. However, her cat, who took the best seat by the wood-burning stove, took one look at him, hissed, and told him he was the ugliest thing the cat had ever seen. As soon as the kitchen door was left ajar the next day, the duckling set off to find a nicer place to be. As he wandered through the woodland, he watched a flock of migrating wild swans. Wow, he thought, it must be great to be one of those guys. Look how gracefully they fly. It wasn't long before winter arrived, with cold nights and flakes of snow. A young farmer found the duckling in the woodland, cold and sleepy, so he took the little bird home to be looked after. As grateful as the duckling was to be warm and indoors, the farmer's children were noisy and boisterous. They kept flapping their arms at him or telling him to say quack. It's a known fact in the duck world that quack is a swear word, and ducks will only say it when they are trying to get humans to bing off. "Look how ugly the duck is!" the children shouted excitedly. The poor duckling fled the house, and so began a long and miserable winter for the poor bird. He managed to find little bits to eat here and there, and sought shelter in a cave on a frozen lake. But he was very lonely. Never since he left his mother had he felt the wing of friendship from another bird. He felt he was destined to be alone and unhappy. Just as winter began to ease and the first signs of spring started to shoot, the duckling, now much bigger, decided he couldn't stand this any longer. The beautiful swans that he had seen in the autumn were now on the defrosted lake. He decided to go and show himself to them, for it was better to be killed by such wonderful creatures than to endure a life alone as an ugly duck. To his complete surprise, the swans welcomed him into their flock. "But why?" asked the duck. "Why would you want an ugly duck as a friend?" "Ugly?" repeated the nearest swan. "My dear fellow, you need to take a good look at yourself." And he nodded at the flat water. "Take a look." As he looked at the reflection of himself looking back, he realised that he wasn't a duck at all. He had turned from a grey, fluffy bundle of gangly legs and weird-shaped beak into a glorious swan. He had never been a duck at all. "Come, join us," called the other swans as they flapped their magnificent wings and took to the air. And it wasn't long before the swan, who'd been told he was ugly, was flying with them in beautiful unison. Here's a list of the materials that I've used today. There's the Daler Rowney watercolour paper that I was talking about at the beginning, Mars Lumograph 6B soft pencil. The paints are Winsor and Newton watercolour paint pans, that's the ones that are in the flat little boxes, not the tubes, and Inktense pencils from Derwent.
If you'd like further artist tutorials, I have a variety of short courses that will help you. There are real-time sessions looking at painting, drawing and marker pens, among others. And if you're keen on producing your own book, there is a more in-depth course on what you need to know about self-publishing a book with illustrations. That covers making key decisions, how to make layouts and dummy books, rhythm and pacing, as well as several tutorials on illustrating a book and a look at the tech. You can either hop over to my website or join me on Patreon for more information. Go on, give it a go.
Oh, I love a happy ending. Apparently Hans Christian Andersen said that this was really a reflection of his own life. Well, I'm very glad that he became a beautiful swan in the end. Next week I will be looking at how to prevent the curse of not finishing your stories. I'm off to festoon myself in festive frivolities. I will see you next week. Nanu nanu.